Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Property Lifestyle Mastery podcast. My name is Jackie Tomes, and on this show we're having open conversations about building a property business that creates not just cash flow but also freedom from those that have been there and done it. So it's the highs, the lows and the lessons along the way in making that all happen. And a very important aspect of being able to create a property portfolio, a property business that ultimately gives you freedom, is the ability to work well with others. So today we're talking about building your dream team, and we've actually talked about this episode a lot on the show. Like, we have to record this is going to be a really great one. So it's all about building your dream team, getting the people that you work with in the right roles within your business based on their skill set and profile. We're going to talk a lot about the Wealth Dynamics personality profiling tool as part of this, as this has been really great to help me in particular to visualize the different skill sets of the people that we work with, and how to get the best out of people and to start really helping people to amplify their strengths and to not have to be better at their weaknesses. So it's myself and Dave this week. You're really going to love this one. So without further ado, let's do this. Hello.
Hello there.
You've got Jack and Dave in the moho, about 3 hours from Calais, just parked up by the side of the road doing a podcast. Welcome to our lives. And the theme of today is Wealth Dynamics. We previously did an episode 30, which was about what is the personality profiling tool Wealth Dynamics and how can you use it to make sure that you are optimized yourself and mastering yourself. And this episode is more about how you use the tool Wealth Dynamics to build a team.
So I would just precursor this one to say we literally get every team member to do Wealth Dynamics. It's actually part of the interview process. So before we hire them, they do Wealth Dynamics. And actually, as a little tip, we don't get every single person to fill out Wealth Dynamics. It's only the very final person when they get to basically job offer stage. Before we offer the job, we just check their profile. That's how important this is to us. It's like super necessary for us to really see how we're going to fit our team together and whether someone's going to fit in the role that we have planned for them.
Yes. So full price, the Wealth Dynamics profile test is about £80 depending on the exchange rate. They do periodically have half price sales, so just have a little Google, make sure there's not a discount code. If there isn't a discount code, then you can reach out to us. I'll put a little email address or something at the end of this episode for where, because you can buy them through us. We basically bulk buy them and sell them on at a discount. So if you can't find a 50% off code, contact us and you can get it cheaper.
And I guess the last thing to say is that there are two types of test. There's one called Wealth Dynamics, which is obviously how we've called this, but there's another one they sell called Talent Dynamics. Wealth Dynamics is exactly the same test, the same questions, the
just
same
packaged
result.
Differently.
Yeah, but it's actually, I think the report they give is slightly different in the language they use, because talent is specifically for team and wealth is specifically for business owners. So they somehow, and entrepreneurs, so they somehow change the wording. Now, we don't actually really look at their reports at all, right?
The actual written word,
yeah.
no. The only thing we look at is the diagram. So that when you take the report, you get given a primary profile and 2 secondary profiles, which is great, and that's what the report will be based on. But it doesn't tell the full story. Obviously, it is an algorithm that's spitting out what report you get. But you get like a little... So the Wealth Dynamics profiles are all kind of plotted out around a square. So there's, if you imagine the 4 corners of the square are 4 profiles, and then halfway in between each of those along the side of the square is another. So there's 8 profiles all around the edge. And they basically plot you out a little graph against how you've ranked against all the different profiles. And it's like on page 3 or something. And there's inside... there's like an inner circle and then an outer circle. So anything that's outside of the inner circle on this diagram indicates that you have particular flow there. Anything beyond the outer circle means you're a demon there.
And anything inside the inner circle means you're going to struggle there.
Yes.
Yeah. So for us, we just look at that. I have to say, if you're doing this for the first time, when we did first do it, we did read the reports, and they are useful. It's good to get your head around, and I'd say it is worthwhile potentially reading the Talent Dynamics ones to kind of get a feel for that. how the wording is.
And really, you ideally want to be able to read, if you're starting to think about team, you kind of want to get to know all of the profiles. It's just a process to get to know them. We've really geeked out on it a lot over the last sort of like 9-10 years, so we know them very well. Obviously we didn't at first. It's just like you can actually take like accreditation tests. Some people are like accredited wealth dynamics practitioners. I'm not one of those, but all of what I've learned has been from practical application of using the tool. I say because I'm probably more heavy on it than you are, but you know it a lot as well.
Yeah.
So yes, as you were saying, it's like looking at that little diagram. Particularly for me, like my primary profile is like mechanic creator. So like I like creating things, but I also like improving things as well. And that's, for me, one of the reasons that I really like the little diagram is because it's basically like a jigsaw with basically no answer that you have to keep trying to find a way to make it work. So really, Dave, for example, he is a very strong lord, but also strong mechanic and accumulator. So you're kind of like a diamond shape that juts off to the left. Dom is a mirror image of Dave to the right hand side, so that's pretty damn exciting, because then you've got like two jigsaw pieces that come and click together. And then I'm much more creator mechanic and more star as well, so that's kind of more the top part of the thing. So you can start to see how you're really wanting to try and create a team where you have flow across all of these different areas, and that is really what wealth dynamics is about, right? Is where is this person in their flow? And in the ideal world, you want a team of people who are all talented. Let's talk about that separately in a second. And in their flow at what they're doing. Because if you're in your flow, you can just do and do and do, and you're never going to get burnt out.
Yeah. So what would you first start with if we're talking about someone listening here is like, oh, I'm going to go and get myself a token, I'm going to check someone out, I'm hiring someone now, my first hire, for example. Where would you start in terms of utilising this tool?
So yes, good point. I think knowing what you are first and foremost is important, but probably you do. That's what the other episode was about. And when you're thinking about who you're going to hire, you want to be strategic about what profile you would like them to be. So for example, if you're wanting someone to come in, maybe let's say you're kind of more like, maybe like Dom, you're kind of more of a people person, you're great at like networking and relationships, but you're not so great on process. So it's kind of more like to be a little bit more disorganized than someone who's very like process driven. So probably if you're thinking about your first hire, thinking what would complement my existing skill set here. Okay. And I think that does make sense. If like often people's first hire is some kind of like assistant or administrator to just come and support on some of those tasks, particularly if you are someone who's perhaps more of a relationships people person on the right hand side of wealth dynamics, or maybe someone who's more of a creator starting person. You won't be so good at finishing, so you kind of need someone who's more along the lines of finishing.
Brilliant. So in other words, try and find someone who complements you, who is slightly different profile to you. But what happens if your first hire is actually usually an admin assistant, right? Someone who's got to organise you. What happens if you are already left-hand side of the profile, which is like me, a lord or a accumulator, and that's your profile? Should you hire someone the same as that?
And you're looking for someone to come in and support you.
And be an assistant.
I think it's interesting because I think you are very, what would be the way to describe you? You're not good at sitting down and creating process. That's not something that you enjoy doing.
Nope.
Gun to your head, you'll sit and do it, but that is not part of it that gets you
going.
So therefore, I would actually say, potentially if you're more like you, I would say even someone who's a bit more like a creator mechanic would actually be good, because you want someone to come in and be like, right, you know, you're doing all the doing, but like what process do you need to have created, and like helping to put in place the structure that you can work within.
Okay. But then if that person's going to be doing the assistant role of just kind of also helping to just manage your diary, manage your calendar, are they going to get burnt out?
Well, I think the interesting thing is it's always going to be a compromise, particularly with that first role. Like, it's not going to be perfect, because really you need more than 2 people for this to really work on cooking on gas. So I would say if it's disorganized and there's no process, it's not being process driven, having someone to come in and like all create the order and organize things and help to organize you with some administration around it, as long as they're not going to be doing administration forever and you're ultimately going to bring someone else in to take that off them, I think that's fine.
Right, how long in your experience is that?
18 months.
18 months?
Yeah.
At which point you ideally need to have a plan to get them into a slightly different role,
yeah,
which might be elevating them or moving them sideways.
I think they can keep the more like continuing to create order and structure, but it's getting rid of the administration part of it. So it's basically them becoming more of a overseeing the process and making sure everything is working well, whereas someone else comes in and deals with the like. It's the ongoing execution and implementation that us creator mechanic people get bored of. It's like, once it's up and running and it's working, someone else has got to do it, because I want to be figuring out something else instead.
And I guess what you're saying is we've got the top part of the graph, which is on the left hand side mechanic, in the middle creator, on the right hand side star. If they were strongest in creator, they'd probably have slightly less strength in star, and mechanic is the most normal look of that. Would you suggest that you're looking for someone like that, or maybe someone who's stronger in mechanic and strong in creator as well?
Someone who's got strength in creator, but it comes round to the left-hand side. Do not hire just a creator. I think it's unlikely you're going to find them purely anyway. If, like, for example, if you're looking to hire a virtual assistant, it's unlikely you're going to find someone who's off the chart creator, even out there in the world, out there looking for that role. We're the annoying people who are out there starting businesses and creating absolute chaos, basically.
Yeah.
At first, until we find ourselves.
So you want that support. And if you're a supporter, then you've said that really you should be looking potentially for a lord. But again, do you not have the same problem of them who's going to create everything?
Yeah. I think it comes back to, again, this what exactly is the pinch point? And the thing is, wealth dynamics will show you your natural flow, but you may have developed talents elsewhere. So as an example, I used to be excellent at project managing things. And actually, if it was all I was doing, I'm pretty damn good at organising an event, pulling all the different elements of it together, but it's not my flow and it actually really drains me. So you could be similar in that sense, like what your flow is different to what your skills and talents are. So it could be that actually you're successfully utilising your talents, even if you are a right-hand sider, to create process, because you're just like getting your shit together and doing it, because we all have the ability to do any of these. And I think that, real entrepreneurs, we just learn how to suck it up and be anything that we've got to be. At one time I was the negotiator. Damn if I'm going to do that role now. And same with like organising logistics and project managing. I think particularly as the entrepreneur, we realise that we have to suck it up. All of these are necessary roles in the business, and you just got to be a chameleon and make it work. And that's what makes entrepreneurs weird ass people. And so you're the same, right? Like, you are a very strong lord. You're also strong in accumulator and mechanic. So everyone's like, oh, Dave, he's just sitting in a spreadsheet all day, being all detailed about it. But that's not true, right? Like, you do tell us about some of the other stuff that you've actually developed great skills at.
I guess the management of outsourced people, able to, that whole aspect of creating the relationship, building the relationship, and working with someone to get the best out of them, I had to just learn how to do, right? It's something I built over many, many different trial and errors of just seeing, if you just talk to someone in a certain way, they respond badly. And I got to the point where I have to say, of anyone on our team, supporter or not, I generally can get better results out of other people than anyone else on the team. However, and actually our contractors, as an example, so often they get frustrated. Even when we bring a supporter, someone right-hand side into the role, they would still prefer to talk to me about things quite often. And that's just because I've built that relationship so strongly and so well, and I give them what they need. But, the problem is I don't enjoy it. It's like for me to go and pick up that phone and have to do all those phone calls, it just distracts me so much from my other work. It just takes me out of the zone of stuff that I'm better at and wears me out. So I feel like I'm just stuck doing that. But I'm good at it.
Same with the timing stuff too. Like timing, Dave's friend is not time. So time can often, like, if you could easily lose sense of it and a lot of time would pass. Yeah. But from a business risk perspective, time passing is a problem, like when you're trying to refinance a property or whatever it may be. So you found ways to be really aware of time as part of the overall process of running the business. But again, you just suddenly go...
It's an interesting point. People might relate to this one. My ability to manage time basically comes from stress. And I used to use that as an excuse for why stress was good. And this idea that basically holding on to worry and anxiety as a method to keep reminding yourself that crap needs to happen isn't good for you as a health bird, but it might work, which it did for us, right? I was able to keep on top of refinance, keep on top of things, but it was just so stressful for me. And that's because it's very out of my flow, whereas someone else, that's just normal. It's just every day their brain just does it naturally. And it's not just the stress of the fact that you might get a down valuation, which is a different stress. It's actually just the stress of knowing, oh wait, when was it that was supposed to happen? How long has it been now? Like, it was, I should check up with that. That is a stress for me. And I used that stress to make sure we got stuff done. And I'm so glad I don't have to worry about that in that same way anymore.
Yeah.
It's managed through process and other team members. But yeah, that's a bad version of it.
And arguably, you went a lot longer than 18 months, right?
I did.
With that. And probably, I have too. Again, I feel like it's kind of the difference between someone who is the entrepreneur heading up the business versus someone who's working in the business. I think we just have more capacity and resilience to push through things and hold on to it. Ultimately, it comes to probably more likely to bring you down good and proper, but ultimately you probably can keep going for longer.
Well, I did. And it did bring me down. And I think that was a big reason for why I ended up having a full meltdown, as it were, because I went for 5-6 years doing that, and it's way out of my comfort zone, and I just did it. I just got my head down and carried on. So yeah, that's not so good. But that's the business owner. So let's move back to the team. So we've got to get these guys in the right position, because you're right, as a non-entrepreneur, they're more likely to not be able to push through head down, and therefore it's going to take less time till they burn out. And key to just have a talk about various roles, because I think it's a great scope landscape to be able to just talk about it. I think another hire that people might be considering, or might consider fairly early on, is someone to support with their social media marketing. So what would you suggest in that respect?
There's a lot of roles in there. What specifically as part of that process? Because there's obviously a very, a more creative, kind of almost like star type role, top right hand corner, when it comes to marketing. There's also more of a creator mechanic figuring out the market side of it, and then there's more of a practical operational implementation of it. So I think most people want to outsource their social media marketing too soon before they're really ready, because if you aren't exactly clear what the business is, who you're there to serve, what the service is, what the message is, how you're going to put stuff across. If you try and outsource that, you are going to have beige, useless social media that's going to do very little in terms of overall results. So you have got to suck it up and keep it long enough to actually make the strategy clear enough and the messaging clear enough to be able to delegate it. So therefore, some of the more practical side of social media, in terms of like when you're posting, making sure you're posting, moving stuff across different platforms, etc. Like it's quite an operational, practical, more of a left-hand side or even bottom person to manage that side of it. Potentially there is some sort of creation in terms of like what is that process for, how often we're creating content, what kinds of content do we want to create, as in terms of like videos, short written things, sharing news articles. Like it's more of a practical planning out what we're going to do and then making sure that we're doing it, which is very different to being the person who is being the creator of the content, which it's got to be you for a period of time whilst you're figuring it out. Sorry, was that a bit of a rant?
Well, it was, and I'm not sure we got to the end result.
Oh, so probe me again, darling.
So what I've heard here is that the role could be anything from operator, which is going to be pure operator, which is going to be left hand to bottom, because left hand side is process and just following the process, and bottom is timing. And you've said there might be a bit of timing, so you might be somewhere between Lord, accumulator, and trader at the bottom. However, if you're wanting someone to come in and be creating your content more for you, or creating your whole marketing plan, more of a marketing manager role, which I think is a higher level. So you, first of all, your advice is you would have had to have passed that. You would have to have done a load of it yourself first, because otherwise it is impossible to pass that over. But if you have managed to do all that yourself, would you suggest creator or mechanic? Where would you put that person?
I think it's this difference between like what place that you've managed to get it to. Okay. Like, is there some kind of a structure for how you want it to happen? Are you clear on a high level what sort of platforms that you'd want to use, how often? Like, can you give some structure around what you're actually looking for, and just brief someone to basically, write up that process, document it, and then sort of look up. I'm hesitant to say manage, because I feel manage is too much of a high level position than is really required. I would say it's more like a coordination kind of role, marketing coordinator, to manage how stuff's being moved around different platforms. So have I again not answered your question?
I'm gonna answer it based on what I've heard. I think the most powerful marketing coordinator profile is a mechanic with strength in creator and strength in Lord, and maybe, if you can, a bit of star. Because they've got to be able to tweak and refine, they've got to be able to follow the process, and they've got to be able to create stuff.
Yep.
And that is the place at which I think with marketing, the most powerful profile is one who can see what's working and what's not working and refine it. Because in marketing, basically, you can spend your whole time throwing stuff out there, and if you're not noticing that it's not hitting home, you're wasting time.
And I think you're
money.
right. Like, if you've got someone who's an accumulator, accumulators love to tick things off their list. And I think that's the danger of having someone who's an accumulator in the marketing role, is they're like, social media post, done, tick. No one saw it. No one replied to it. Like, no one's contacted us for months. Like, it's clearly not working, but I've ticked it off my list. It's been done.
I'm good.
Yeah.
And I'd say there's also something really helpful about having someone who can help with the creative side of the visual aspect.
Yes, that's
because you don't want to be doing that yourself, and you want someone who can just very easy just jump in, make something look a bit good for you, and a creator is a good help in that area. So I would say that's more what I've gone.
Good summary of that diatribe, darling. Yeah, I'll take that.
Right, let's go on to another aspect of the business. I think the most complex thing we've had to hire for is our portfolio management of the lettings. So when we brought our lettings in-house, we've tried many iterations of this.
So many iterations.
Right, and we brought our lettings in-house, and you're suddenly sitting there thinking, right, we've got to have someone who can talk to tenants and like look after them and make sure they're happy. Got to have someone who can be on top of all the compliance, all the organisation of everything, make sure it's all happening and the process is being followed. Someone on top of the maintenance, which requires both organisation but also timing, because there's got to be done quickly and they've got to be aware of what's going on. And you're like, oh my God, it's all over the place, right? And then you've got to have someone who's going to help you set up the processes. So basically, if you're just hiring one person, you need someone who's strong everywhere.
Yeah, and I think that's again where we struggle as business owners, because you might have been running your lettings for a long time, and you're like, well, I'm doing all of it, I'm making sure that we get the compliance on time, that we're following the process to finding a good tenant, or having a good relationship with tenant. Like, I'm doing all of it. I'll just hire another one of me. And you are looking for a diamond in the rough to be able to do all of that, and probably they're running their own business, to be honest with you. Or you might find someone who wants to come on board with you. Maybe you can structure it in a way that's kind of bringing them into the business, but that might not actually give you what you're looking for if you're trying to bring your lettings in-house and be more cost effective anyway. So yes, for us it's been figuring out how you can splinter out all of these different roles so it's all working really effectively, and there's a lot of cogs in the machine. So there's a particular part of this that you want to talk about.
Let's start at the very beginning, because I think the hardest part is starting it, right? Let's say you've got your portfolio to say 40, 50 tenants. You're wanting to start bringing it in-house, and you're wanting to you're going to be able to set up some of the process yourself, but you're going to want someone who can help with that. Who would you go after as a starting point to just like bring it in-house? Because you can't hire 4 people straight away, right?
I think for me, probably we're back to this kind of slightly creator mechanic Lord profile. Someone who can decide how the process is going to work, get everything set up, and get it starting to work. That would be my answer to that.
It's a powerful one for the starting it, really, is creator with mechanic.
I think starting in a lettings business, I think starting in other businesses potentially is the mirror image, because you want to be more like creating the brand, the relationships. Like that's normally the way around that Wealth Dynamics works, is like it's like the seasons. So it starts at the top and it goes to the right, starts at creator and then comes all the way around the right hand side
to supporter
and ends in like Lord I suppose. Lord mechanic.
So just to confirm that, I guess that you're talking about it as like you've got to start the business up, which is creating it. Then you've got to go out and be the face of it, which is the star, and build brand and attraction so people are interested. Then you've got to go and nurture those relationships with the people, which is the supporter, next one round.
Then you've got to close the deals.
You start closing deals with these people, which is the deal maker. Then you've got to start actually making it all happen operationally with those deals you've agreed and kind of get it all working together. That's the timing, which is the trader. Then you've got to just start
following through, completing
everything and just ticking off all the lists of all the operations you've set up, which is the accumulator. Then you've got to start stepping back and looking at those processes and kind of just managing them and just keeping them ticking over and doing it. That's the Lord. And then finally you've got to step even further back and say, right, how's it going? Where could I improve? How do I tweak and improve this business? And that's the mechanic. And then it brings us back to creator, because then you start saying, right, what do I do next? That's the process it's supposed to go through.
Yes. So really the mirror image of what we're talking about here, in terms of like we're going the opposite way around, creator, mechanic, Lord, because particularly with a lettings business, it's so process driven. Like it has to be.
Yeah. So we've got the first person who's going to be around that area. So then I guess let's just jump forwards, because I think how you grow a business in that respect, or a team, depends very much on your skill set and how involved you choose to be.
Yep.
But what I would say is, what I said at the beginning is, it doesn't work with just one person.
Yep.
It doesn't work very well anyway. You can put someone in, but there's just going to be too many weaknesses. So how have we dealt with that?
So I think we've definitely splintered off more of the process, operational implementation part from more of the relationship side of it. So we've worked with my dad for quite a number of years, and he's been doing more of the tenant facing side of things. So
and
more.
Your dad is
He's strongest in star, he's actually below the line I think on supporter. He's more like a star creator mechanic. He's very similar to me. And more star than me. So he's been great in terms of like creating relationships and creating a good impression on people. But my dad's been involved for a long time for an extended period of time in more of the operational relationship delivery, which is really outside of his flow, which is something that we're looking at the moment. Really, it's starting to evolve. It does need to be more of a supporter, deal maker role as you start to get into a later season of the business. So he's been great for like setting up and creating those relationships. There's been like quite a lot of negotiation as part of that as well, which he enjoys. So I feel like I haven't answered your question again.
Yeah, you're really good at this.
Sorry, this is where I am at today.
So what I'm getting from this is we brought your dad in as like the relationship person, but he was very good for the first period because we were very much building relationship with new tenants, getting it all set up and building the brand with tenants and selling ourselves, negotiating, getting tenants on board, and the star profile worked really well for that. But admittedly, as we move into more ongoing management of tenants and looking after the relationship, and when things hit conflict and problems happen, he's not necessarily best suited to the looking after role, which is more of a supporter role. So it's like that weakness he has in supporter creates a weakness in the business, and more important than that, it wears him out. He gets worn out by it and burnt out.
And which means that, as with all of these things, you're able to do things for a certain period of time, and he's actually he's done a great job at becoming great at those things for a period of time, but when it's out of your flow, it's a ticking time bomb. So then we do want, as it were, an on the ground tenant facing relationship person, and that would be your supporter type profile. But they can't do it alone because they need to be backed up by someone in process and potentially someone in timing. So talk through that. So I guess sometimes you can have people who have got supporter strength that then slips down into more of the timing at the bottom. So I think that would be a good thing to keep in mind. Someone who's good at relationships and managing people, but also an awareness of time. I think that would be an ideal middle ground?
I'd say also from experience, usually this person is the person who's going to be negotiating with your tenants on anything and everything, whether that's the rent or how you're going to resolve a conflict. And actually the deal maker aspect is very powerful there, because just to have someone who really sees it and sees the two sides of the equation and how best to make a good deal work is very powerful when you're working with tenants, to make sure you're really bringing them on board and on side with a win-win situation. So yeah, you're right. Supporter, deal maker, trader would be a very powerful on the ground person. Yes.
Now I would say this person, there's a good chance they might not be good at the timing element from an actual administrative perspective. Again, not for an extended period of time, not naturally. So having someone who's more skilled, skilled's the wrong word, has strength in more like accumulator trader deal maker from more of a operational process management perspective. And again, I don't think this has to be someone, for me, this is an outsource overseas kind of a role, managing the timings of all the different things, because there's like a lot of moving parts. Someone who can be aware of how long that boiler that's been broken for a week now, like that person would be more aware of that timing passing and following up with things, like they've just got their ear to the ground in terms of what's happening and what's got to happen next. Generally not in a creating the process part, but in a project management sense.
And to be clear, that's an area we have misfired in, right?
100%.
We've had too much left-hand side in our lettings process, too much accumulator lord and not enough trader timing. And it means that when that happens, you do find, doesn't matter how much you're on top of the process and the system, the people just forget, they don't notice that time has passed. It's amazing. It's just like suddenly you fall into a process where a boiler does take too long to get fixed because they don't realise that that's taken a week or two and it's winter and someone's without heat and water. And that isn't just automatic for them, but you get a trader in the role and that you tell them that's high priority and they're going to be all over it.
Not necessarily. No, they're more likely to be all over it. And I think part of our confusion for this misfiring on the more trader aspect has been because of you. With love, because you've just have had such learnt behaviour from a timing perspective. I think we kind of imagined that would translate to other people who were similar in profile to you, but that is without a doubt clear now. That is not the case. And we are on our team overall thinnest on the ground of people with timing. And you can tell, like, the processes are there, but sometimes it's just like we're just misfiring in terms of like
speed,
tempo.
Which is the name of the bottom side, to confirm that whole bottom side is called tempo. So now what we've got is a people person on the ground who's a supporter stroke deal maker. Then we've got someone who's administering the maintenance stuff and is like making sure the whole project management is going well, because that's what it is, right? It's project managing the maintenance teams. There's so much stuff. There's like maintenance team, refurb team, and then you've got all the things like electricians, gas engineers, all of that stuff, cleaners, whoever's doing the viewings, there's just so many people, right? Dealing with voids. Okay, and that's all. I'd say the project management of lettings should be bottom, right? Trader, accumulator, deal maker. So let's talk about back office, dealing with updating ASTs, making sure all documents are in the right place. Can that and creating the new lettings adverts, for your...
that part, let's put that aside. Creating the new lettings adverts, potentially put that to one side.
Well, first of all, do you think the person at the bottom can also administer your whole back-end system as well, updating your tenant stuff?
It depends how big your portfolio is, because I think there is, we're definitely seeing it now, there's a role for that. There's enough stuff going on for almost like an overseer who's got trader as a primary, but the updating of all of that stuff that you just said, barring the listing, I think that's best to be Lord Accumulator, because it's just very process driven. You're doing the same thing over and over again. As long as you've got someone with one eye on the timing, I think that it's better for it to be someone who's a completer, who likes finishing things and likes repeating the same process over and over again.
Okay, so then that brings us to we've got in our dream team. In our dream team lettings, we have got And these don't have to be full-time roles. And I think that was one of our big learnings, was how you bring people on and how many hours you give them. We've got some sort of a supporter deal maker who is managing all those relationships and is on the ground, is actually face-to-face. We've got some sort of a project manager who's down the bottom, trader deal maker with accumulator in there as well, just really pulling everything together and making sure everything's on time and it's all working well as a team. And then we've got someone in the back office updating all of those systems, making sure all the information is correct, and just doing the day-to-day drudgery of keeping everything updated. And that's a Lord accumulator. This could literally be like a 1 hour a day
drudgery.
job.
That's drudgery
to me,
you,
even though I'm a Lord.
I guess it's different because you're the business owner, but it's
Someone
an
loves
enjoyable
that.
role. That's an administration role. Like, I get to tick it all off. Like, that's just, we got to be careful to not pour our perceptions onto this. That's why I had to pick you up on that.
Well done. Yeah. You're completely right. So we've got this person who loves just ticking off the jobs and actually really enjoys that, doing the back office. That could be like at the beginning a 1 hour a day job, right?
Amazing,
it's just like log in, notice any of the latest ASTs, bring them into the system, log any new information, and it's done. So let's come to lettings, adverts, marketing your tenancies.
I mean, I think potentially it could get to the point that it does fit to the more Lord accumulator side of things. But if you're talking about Dream Team, that advert is marketing and how you present it well, make sure it looks good, that it sounds enticing. And particularly if it's not working and you're having to iterate and make it look better, just in general, people on the left-hand side are so focused on getting it done that they're not like, has this been done in a way that people are like, oh, get me in that property. Mm-hmm. So that's where comes back to more of a kind of a star creator profile is better. I think that's, again, it might be something that if you, for a period of time, you can put your eye on it, what sort of blurb that you want, what's the process for what kind of photos go where. But if you haven't got that person with putting a good eye on it, we've seen some terrible stuff go out under our name because we thought that we've set up the process clearly enough, but it does require a creative mind for that stuff.
And someone who's got that awareness of brand and awareness of how things come across really well, rather than just getting the job done.
Tick off the job advert. It's live. It's terrible. The first picture's a picture of a toilet. Brilliant.
We've had that.
We've had that. And I think it's like it's so hard. You have to just try and error and see where stuff goes wrong and try not to get annoyed when you realise that it's not letting because the picture of the toilet is the first picture. It's like, okay, we thought that was kind of like an obvious thing that you wouldn't do, but actually if you are going to delegate it to someone who is purely left-hand side, it's got to be really prescribed, and we just kind of assumed that it was common sense, but it's not.
It's not. No,
it's brand, it's marketing.
So you can see the real complexity and nuance of how a team can come together, and we've iterated many things and actually encountered lots of problems, which is how that dream team there has been designed, because we've had the wrong person in the wrong role, and sometimes it's gone to the point where someone's really worn out. So can we just talk about what happens if you get the wrong person in the wrong role and you don't realise it? When does it go bad? What have we had experience in that?
I guess to precursor the answer to that question, let's just talk about talent. Now, I was realising at the beginning when it's like, there's the two options, wealth dynamics or talent dynamics, depending on whether it's for really an entrepreneur or for someone who's going to be a team member. Talent dynamics is not the right word, because this is not assessing talent, this is assessing flow. And someone can be brilliantly in their flow doing administration, but they might not actually be talented at it. They could be average. And that just because they have come out in the right sector on wealth dynamics does not mean that they are a talented right person for your team. So there probably is another episode that's more about recruitment and this wider assessment piece. But in terms of having someone in the right role from a wealth dynamics perspective, it's hard, isn't it? Because I feel like we're really good at this now. I'm trying to think back to where it went wrong before. Can you give insight?
Yes, so what about... We've had issues with timing, and I think we've probably had team members who are, like myself, too involved in timing, but we're left-hand side. So I think it's one of the biggest mistakes people make, a process person in charge of project management. And we've had that many a time because it stemmed from me, and the person who's had to deal with that does reach a point where it all starts to fall apart for them, and they get worn out and they start to feel drained by the role, and but they keep forging on because they're quite stubborn, because us left-hand siders are, and they don't necessarily tell you about it, and you're just kind of going, but why are things messing up a bit? Why is it not quite working as well? That person is not doing a very good job. It's just that they're out of their flow and they've run out of steam, and it doesn't make, it's not. And I'd say we've had that in the lettings role. We've had that overseeing maintenance in the lettings role. That's been a big one that I think wears people out if they're not timing oriented enough. It's just like, it's hard. It's really hard. You need to be a project manager down the bottom. We've definitely had burnout on the right hand side for looking after people. I think
You don't mean that?
On the right hand side, sorry, not the right hand side. So if we didn't have a right hand sider in the people role,
yep.
And even like we say with your dad, I think he's burning out he's a star. He's right next to supporter, and yet appeasing and looking after tenants is a different role, different scope to a star role, which is very much a brand and being the face. And I feel like he's burning out from it, and he's been doing that for 2 to 3 years now. And I think that's just too much for him, and it's going to take him down eventually. So yeah. Any others that you can think of?
That's a really good overview that you've given there.
Marketing. We've had someone in marketing who's been the wrong fit.
Yes, it was not. That wasn't anything to do with wealth dynamics, I don't think.
Okay, fine.
That was more of just the right, potentially, values and the kind of right talent that we were looking for, I would say.
Okay.
So yeah, another conversation.
Great. One thing I would add, not just completely jumping to the side here, a bookkeeper is nearly always going to be a lord. Okay, I've seen it time and time again. If someone ever applies to be a bookkeeper for you, they will just be a lord. Like, I've never come across a bookkeeper, particularly from the Philippines, where anyone who seems to end up in that area is just lord, and the question is, do they have strength of mechanic or accumulator? That's it. So that's been really interesting to see, because it just shows the type of people who gravitate towards that career. They're all the same profile,
and I just love the satisfaction of just like getting it all organised is the wrong word, like just ticking it all off and just putting it all in the right place. And that it's a big, you've got to do that over and over again a lot of times, and that is not drudgery to them, Dave.
No,
that is joy.
I know. I've literally heard it on interviews and speaking to team members who are like, what do you love most about this job? Doing the reconciling and it all being done. And I'm like, how is that what you enjoy the most? Just ticking off all that's crazy to me.
And they look at you and you're like, you're a crazy man.
So yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, and I think we have had another issue with creating. Whenever we have someone who is given the job of creating a new process or spreadsheet or something like that, and they're not a creator, I tell you, if you try and give that to a supporter, they're probably never going to get started.
Yeah.
If you try and give that to a lord or a mechanic, they will get started. And if you give it to a mechanic, they'll probably get quite far. But if they don't have enough strength in creator, it'll weary them, and it's going to get, what happens is they usually get started quite fast. It's like go, go, go at the beginning, and then it just like gets peters out because as they have to keep creating and keep creating and keep creating, it's like they just start to lose the will or lose the energy or something. I
would also say in process creation, past a certain point, that really probably going to have like a creator mechanic helping with that. But creators and mechanics, we're not finishers and not necessarily good at integrating that into a wider process that continues to work. And so you might end up with these beautiful process documents that aren't really being rolled out in a way that actually has longevity to it. So that is a challenge to keep an eye on. And I haven't quite figured out that ongoing process for how that creator mechanic interrelates, I think, with more of that trader role, because the traders can see more of the process and the people and how those things come together, but the process kind of has to be at a certain point for those people to be able to conceptualize what it is we're exactly doing. So there's some kind of interrelation between those two roles, which is currently something that I'm mulling on a lot. Wow, okay, your final takeaway for everyone from this episode.
Final takeaway is that, for us, this stuff, as I said at the beginning, has been unbelievably key to getting a dream team in place. And every time we've had someone fall off the rails or really struggle, it's nearly always, not always, but nearly always, because they're just doing a role that isn't right for them. And Wealth Dynamics could have given us the clue to that earlier.
Yes. That's why even now, like, we've got someone who we're about to hire who we feel really, really good about. There's a free version of Wealth Dynamics that you can do that just gives you the ballpark that they're in, and he's done that. We think regardless of what exactly he falls out like, we're still going to go with it, because his role could evolve in a number of different ways. But I still want to know. Like, I want to know from before this person even starts, what is their profile? If I'm going to get them to do something that's slightly out of it, I've got to keep one eye on how long they're doing that for and curate their journey into a different kind of role. Yeah. So yes, regardless, always do it.
And it's all part of that process for me of making sure that your team are happy, because a happy team is a team that's going to really perform well for you. And in order for them to be happy, they can't be getting burnt out and getting worn out with what they're doing. And so really, we want top talent, we want star performers, and this for us has been a massive part of curating and managing people into a role where they can be a star performer, because you have people otherwise who are star performers at heart. You put them in the wrong role and they're just average, and it's a real shame. You can see the difference, and so it's been a real clue for us, like a little map towards where people should be, and learning it has just been amazing.
And I think it's something that we have looked at people's wealth dynamics, and the more that we've learnt this, the more that we've started to go, okay, maybe that's why that person's struggling in that role. Let's move them to this other role, which is more in line with their flow. Don't do that forever, because really, if someone is talented, even if something is a bit out of their flow, they will do an okay job at it. And when you get them in something that should work for them, they should fly. And if they don't, they're probably not the right person. And that's an exit situation, which we'll do another episode about at some point. So use the Wealth Dynamics profile, particularly start to look at that shape that comes out, get to learn the different profiles, and just have one eye on this when you're deciding who you want to hire. Make sure that the job description really fits into broadly an area of a profile. Be clear about what profile you want. Use that to guide that hiring process, but know that it's not the be-all and end-all of creating a great team, a great culture, and for assessing talent. It's just one piece of the puzzle. Awesome. I really hope you enjoyed listening to that conversation, because it was really a joy to record so many years of learnings and lessons and trial and error to come to that conversation. So if you want to take action off the back of this episode in terms of using your Wealth Dynamics profile and starting to use that in conjunction with the people that you work with, be those team members or investors or anyone else, then we'll put a link in the show notes for where you can purchase Wealth Dynamics tokens through us. Sometimes Wealth Dynamics do discounts, so you can get like a 50% off discount code to be able to buy the tokens directly from Genius U Wealth Dynamics. If for any reason they don't have an offer on at the moment, just do a bit of a Google. We bulk buy these tokens and we do sell them off at a discount. So I'll put the link in the show notes where you can buy a token from us at a discount if that's something that you want to do. Awesome. In the meantime, this time next week, you'll be joined by myself and Dom, and we're talking about business planning. We have been through a hell of a journey when it comes to getting the balance right with enough planning versus enough execution. So we're going to be sharing the lessons and an amazing tool that we use to help us to do all of that planning. So that's me and Dom next week. Until then, have a great week pondering your profile and how you can work more effectively with others based on everyone optimizing their strengths and letting go of their weaknesses.